All right, everybody, welcome to the planning board meeting of March 25th. Tonight we have a public hearing, Zero McCunco site plan, which I believe is going to be continued. And then it is downtown zoning amendment discussions and review minutes, discussion of possible zoning bylaw minutes, including the covered porch law, and then any other administrative matters or reports from board members. So we'll start off with the continuance on the Zero McGunko, right?
Yeah, that is correct, Dale. Just to give the board a quick brief, I've been working with the applicant's attorney on this, and I have asked for renderings of the building, and I have not received those yet. And so I did have a meeting with the attorneys representing the applicant last Thursday, and I did speak to him, and I expressed the concerns of the board to have a full application, which would include the renderings of the building tonight and for a 2-week continuance, and hopefully early next week I'll be receiving some plans that I can therefore circulate out to the planning team.
So we just vote on a continuance, right? And then do we have to close the public meeting for tonight?
So yes, it's just we can actually, we have never opened the public hearing on this one, Dale, so we're just looking to continue the public hearing.
Yeah. So if there's a motion to continue, in what time?
So 7:15 on April 13th. I'm sorry, April 8th.
Okay, is there a motion to continue the Zero McGunko public hearing until April 8th at 7:15?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Krisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Deepa Venkat, aye.
Ruberton, aye.
Dale Buchanan, aye. Passes 5-0-0.
And thank you for heading that off, by the way. That's exactly what we want to happen. If they don't have the stuff, we don't waste our time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. Now we're gonna continue with our downtown zoning amendment discussion. So do you want to start off, Pete, and just kind of remind everybody where we're at?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we kind of went over kind of where everything kind of sat. I talked about how much money was left in the grant, where I thought the direction of it was. And then after that site walk, we were going down a couple different avenues, right? Do we talk about the whole district, expanding the districts? Do we talk about the uses? Do we talk about, I think at the last planning board meeting, we talked about, Trish brought up the kind of the question about industrial versus light industrial. And these are all things that are great, which I think are spurring out of this conversation about downtown zoning. However, I believe to get the what we have been working on for the last year, talking about setbacks and architectural details and height requirements, I think that stuff we need to kind of focus on and kind of refocus the direction of this grant to prep and prepare that information into our bylaw, which pertains to setbacks and height, and edit that for the upcoming town meeting. And then also continue to work on and focus on these issues such as expanding the district, looking at the use table, and creating a use table which would include light industrial uses versus heavy industrial uses. So with that, I reached back out to the consultant from MAPC, Chris Culture, and actually I took the advice of the board, and I kind of sent him the video recording of the meeting, and I believe he's watched that. Emma and I had a fairly detailed conversation of the direction of the conversation that we had as a whole, and he's done a couple things. Number one, he has put together a technical memorandum, which was dated March 28th. And then he also did put together a little memo, which was dated on March 18th, which talked about next steps, right? And so with that, I think these are good lead-ins about what our next steps shall be. However, I think we should take care of the business that's in front of us regarding detailing architectural stuff and setbacks and height. So with that, if I can kind of present to the board a little bit of the research that Emma and I have done. Emma was able to, within our packet, in listening to the board from the last meeting, Emma was able to put together a little, I would say, graphic that listed a kind of a compare and contrast from the three projects that we were talking about. We were talking about 128 Main. We were talking about, we were also talking about 21 Main Street. And then also we were talking about the height of Town Hall and where that stands in comparison. So one of the main things we were talking about is height and what changes we would like to see to height. I think in the current zoning, it just says 4 stories. And I think we were looking to actually make that actually 3 stories. And at the last rendition of the bylaws, we talked about 3 stories. And at the last meeting, we talked about, okay, let's put a number on that height. I mean, a number together, regarding how tall a building shall be as defined. And so just talking about height alone, I just kind of want to open up the conversation to kind of talk about this is, in comparison, the current zoning calls for 4 stories. The proposed would be 3 stories. I put 38 feet on our little diagram if everyone has it in front of them. And in comparing the buildings that have been developed into downtown, 21 Main Street is actually 38 feet tall from average mean grade up to the ridge line of the building. Correct. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, Peter. Can I just put up the doc for the public's benefit, right? Can I just put up the handout that?
Sure.
I can do it, or you can do it. Doesn't matter.
If you have it up, please do, Joe. I'm just reading from I'm reading from a printout. So.
And so this is what you're talking about right now, right?
Correct. So, just if I can continue on building heights, across the street from Town Hall is 21 Main Street. That is a 3-story building, and the peak, and it measures to the top of the main side roof, which is on the.
Speak really quick. You talking about 21 Main Street or?
I'm sorry.
8?
Let me get back to 21 Main Street. 21 Main Street measures 38 feet tall.
You just said, because you said across from Town Hall.
And I was leading into,
okay.
Our second building, 128 Main Street, across from Town Hall, is 3 stories, and that measures 40 feet 10 inches from average median grade up to the top of the mansard roof. Now, the obviously that's the top of the mansard roof, and that's the tallest to that building. However, and it's not, I didn't add it into the sheet, but to the top of the, to the top of the not the mansard, but the other part, the other section of the roof. The top of the parapet, I'm going to say, is 37.6 inches. So in this graph, I used to the top of the mansard roof to start the discussion. But to add into the discussion, the top of the parapet roof on the adjacent roof is 37.6 inches. And so I know at the last meeting, we were talking about 38 feet and having that be the max height allowed. And that's what I kind of put down after seeing these 2 examples. I also went back and I pulled out the drawings for Town Hall when the Town Hall went through its restoration process. And looking at the building from the front of Town Hall, from the bottom step all the way up to the peak measures 50 feet. And so town hall is 50 feet and it is it is the tallest building besides the church across the street, the steeple of the church across the street.
Okay, real
So-
quick, Pete, on the 128 Main, is that an actual height or is that on the plans?
That is on the as-built plans.
Okay, and
Mhm. And it's on the plans that was approved, the plans that were approved by the planning board. It was also on the plan and the plans that were submitted as
okay, I just want to make sure that they did that part right.
so that's I would like to kind of let that kind of lead into our discussion regarding height. Does anybody have anything to add, or would anybody like to kind of make a statement on where they think that appropriate height and or feet should land?
Now, do we have any 4-story buildings in town? Does anyone know that?
Well, the 4-story buildings that are in town, are the Cirrus Apartments. Those are 4-story buildings.
Yeah.
We would limit our look at this to the downtown zoning, right? Because
Correct.
isn't it the limited scope of this?
This is downtown zoning only in the downtown districts. Yes. I did not have the plans, and I could not find the plans for the Mason, not the Mason building. It is the Mason building near the library. So I could not find the exact height on that building.
So town hall is basically the tallest building at this point, other than the church with the steeple going up and all
Correct. Mhm. And so right now we say 4 stories. What we're proposing would be 3 stories at 38 feet.
that. Because I think at 38 feet, I don't think you can put 4 stories in probably. Anyway. Was it Joe who's asking a question?
The difference between those two is fairly small. I think the more significant difference is how it relates to the street. The setback, I think, is what makes 128 seem so much taller, is because it's just right, it's kind of right on top of you.
How much, Peter, how many feet will we pick up on that 4.5 with the streetscape redesign? Probably another 4.
Probably another 3 to 4.
Also, I wasn't sure about 128 Main. I don't know if I'm looking at a current rendering here because I just Googled it. But is that 40 feet to the top of that corner tower, or is it to the main part of the building?
It's to the top of the corner tower.
Okay. So the
Main
rest of the building must be,
37.
37.6.
yeah, closer to that range, to 38 range. Okay.
I don't have any discrete comments on the height. I think, I don't know, more so on the setback. And I feel like the setback on 21 Main gives you that room to breathe, gives you that space to sit out there on a nice day and use that space, whether it's for the business or just in general. So 21 is 9.5 and 12.5 on the second part of that structure that sets back a couple extra feet, right? So, if you want to limit the discussion to the height for right now, I can stop, but I would.
Well, I just had a comment on the height, because right now, isn't it, what is it now? Because it says 4 stories, but didn't we went over this on Alton Street one, that it's 30 something, and then approval from the planning board, you could go to 40, 42 or something like that. So what we're doing is eliminating all that and saying just the maximum is going to be 38. So
Correct. And the discussion last week, there was a special permit by criteria that we kind of struck, which would allow a special permit to go up to, I believe, 45. I think it was 45 feet. I'm looking for I'm looking for the older bylaws in front of me. I'm sorry.
okay, so anyone that's coming in is probably going to just max it out at 38 feet as they can to fit the 3-story then. So right now isn't there, I thought we changed that at some point. Isn't there still a height, a foot restriction, like 30 something, and then with our approval, you can go to 40.
I think it's 45. Yeah.
Okay. And that's the downtown district, right? But they can build up to 37 or something without.
I'm just gonna pull it up.
Maybe I missed something, but I thought I remember on the Golden Street one, we had a discussion about that where they're going over the normal, allowed, which they could do with the permission.
I think I'd be interested in keeping it at the 30. I think we have 2 buildings right now that are good examples of 38 feet, which are both 128 and 21 Main, are both 38 feet or slightly below for the main part of the building. And I think maybe that's a good place to keep it, but I'm also wondering about having a potential to go a little higher by special permit, but only
Dangle some cheese.
If they
What's that?
offer something.
Yeah, they have to offer.
no, but not general all across the whole building, but only for a special feature. Like if they have a little tower on it, or they're doing something.
Architecturally.
Yeah,
I
so
like
not
it.
an apartment, not a whole nother level, not just bumping up the whole floor, but like if they're a little corner condition that they're doing something special, or I think it allows a variation of the skyline, say.
And maybe you have to spell it out that way, saying feature may be with approval may go, a little bit higher.
Yeah.
For a feature,
And it should have a limit on it too.
Yeah.
It should have a limit on it too. For a special feature only.
Yeah.
Not for
A whole floor.
basically not for living space or something like that. I'm not sure how to put it, but I think it could allow a little fun variation in things.
Break up the straight lines.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of everyone going to 38 feet, there's a little, you can add something to it, but it shouldn't be part of the regular roof line it shouldn't be the norm. It has to be the exception on the building.
And the 2 buildings are kind of a different roof type as well, correct? So would 38 or that 40 kind of limit you on the kind of style of roof that you would look at because of the scale and proportion?
Well,
because I wonder if mansard roof will have that kind of a limitation because of the kind of styling of that roof itself, and would 38 be kind of tying them down, and then everybody starts to have a similar roof style going on to get away with it?
well,
21 and 128 are completely different roof styles, kind of, and they're
Yeah,
both close to the same height, right?
yeah, 128 Main has kind of the mansard roof on it, without the curve. Next time there'll be a curve. But they have a mansard roof on it, and then dormers up from that, where 21 Main Street has a gable and dormers in the gable. So,
So it's doable.
so they do have two different roof types. The dormer types they're using are similar, but a shed roof would be very easy on in either one of them if they went that way. So.
So I think what I'm hearing from the board is everyone is kind of landed at 38 feet, and to add add a clause for a special permit to allow an applicant to go greater than 38 feet to a maximum of and just kind of leave it blank.
Or a feature, special feature.
With the ability of providing any special feature, which will add to the historical to the character of the building, in the enhancement of architectural detailing, as determined by the planning board. Is that what I think? Is that what the planning board's kind of landed on?
Yeah, I'm not sure about leaving it blank though. Maybe we should put in 45 or something.
To a maximum of.
The only thing I think with that is because it has to be approved by the planning board, so they can just limit it to whatever looks good. But if there's a feature that would look good at 46 feet and you can only go 45 and it looks mashed down, or I don't know if that would be the case, but I would think, my opinion is that since it's coming to the board and we're going to decide what they can do, we should be allowed to decide if what they're proposing, if it was 46 feet and it looked awesome, that would be okay, and we're not going to let them build an 80-foot tower on top of their building. You know what I mean?
About
but if we limit it, then it might limit to what they do, or they might just say, forget it, I'll just make it straight.
What about to a height of like 48 feet or something that's just still a couple feet, a foot or two below town hall? Because that's been a big deal around town.
Yeah.
About staying below town hall.
Because I think probably a 10-foot feature is a pretty tall feature on top of a roof.
I think so.
I think that would, and then it wouldn't start getting into like, well, we have a 16-foot one that looks really good. Well, I don't know. That would kind of help, but at least give them some, make it pretty, good where they can do a lot of stuff, and the board has to decide anyway, has to approve it. So I would just hate to make it too short and then people just don't want to bother.
Yeah, I just think about having that maximum on that,
something like that, extra 10 feet would be good, I think.
Yeah, so it's an extra 10 feet, which is very tall, for a feature. And we would have to be, whatever planning board would have to be pretty careful about that, but.
Yeah. And then someone put a little capel up there or something with something on it that looked really good. And so I'd agree with that.
But just a couple of questions. So we're saying a max of 3 stories or 38 feet with a provision to allow for up to 48 with a special permit for a feature, not additional residence or usable space. And then we're saying that for all of the ADD, all of the Ashland downtown zoning zone, all of the ADD zone, all the different ones would get this. Is that correct? That's the proposal.
Yeah, downtown, anything.
The ADD zone, I'm just trying to be, okay.
Yes, this would be the ADD's A zone, and yes, but it would follow suit throughout, Joe.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Peter.
It would follow through. It would follow throughout, I would say.
All of the ADDs, right? And it's ADD, is it?
B and C.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So they would all be similar. There would be no differential between the three.
Okay. So, yep. Sorry. Okay. And so I think as like just a good just like test against this, I think it would be useful as we approach the end of this, when we get to the end of this conversation, to just put up that map that you pulled together for us, Peter, and just as a board, look at, here's all the EDDs, and this is what we're saying for these zones. Like just to look at it and consider it for a few moments. Before we attempt to try to do that, if the board agrees or likes that idea, one other thing here is we're saying 3 stories or 38 feet. So what if they go subsurface and it's 38 feet, but they're putting a living space below grade or something like that? Is that a concern? Do we need to do anything to cover that angle? I'm not trying to complicate it. I'm just trying to raise it as a point of consideration.
I think the measurements were given, like if the 3 stories are 38 feet, is like whichever is kind of like up, it has to be up to 38 feet, that you can't.
Yeah, like if you think you could build a building with 4 stories that's 38 feet tall, go ahead, pitch, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, well, you can't. You can have it be 3 stories or 38 feet, but you can't have 4 stories squished into 30. I mean, that'd be really tight. You wouldn't want to be in that building really, but.
Yeah, does not town hall have a down basement kind of way level too? Is that including that it's 40 feet or?
50 feet, yes.
That includes.
Oh, okay. And how tall is our public safety building scheduled to be for?
That's a great question, Latchy. I don't have an answer to that.
But
Okay.
it's not in downtown.
It's not in the downtown.
Yeah, it's
zone,
not
right?
downtown, but I'm just thinking.
I can get an answer for you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yep.
But yes, ours should be like measured from the sidewalk, measured from the public way or something like that. Measured from grade.
Yeah, average median grade, I put. Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add on height?
We're good.
No? Okay.
Hey, Joe, go.
No, I'm good.
Continue where you were starting.
I was just doing a little search on like what those things could be, those little special features. So things that have come up are like both little pinnacles, which is more historic on a building, something like a clock tower, or a clock on top of a building. Sometimes there's almost looks like a little like a widow's walk kind of on top of a building, where it might be an observation kind of area. Things like that, which could just give something really unique to a building. And then that's the kind of opportunity I was kind of leaving room for.
I think it's a good idea, and it still has to be approved, so it's has to fit in.
Yes, has to be approved.
Should we kind of mention a few of these so that it gives them an idea for starters versus keeping an open slate?
It might be an idea, so that they get the idea that it's not for, I can squeeze in an extra penthouse apartment up there, that it's not for really occupiable space in that way, not for sellable space.
Yeah, example, clock tower, et cetera, whatever.
Yeah, clock tower.
Capitol.
Cupola.
Yeah, cupola, something like that.
Pinnacles, you said.
Would terraces be allowed, like around Mill Pond area, if people wanted to say the residential house wants to put a terrace on top of it? I know flat roof doesn't make sense in a snow-covered area, but I'm just saying, a terrace be considered okay? Because we're trying to be creative, so terrace is part of that, right? So.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at things individually, but I could definitely see like an observation area, to have this overlook, which I think would be nice to have in Ashland anyway, to be able to look over Ashland.
Yeah, the Mill Pond area seems to be like ideal spot for them.
No
Yeah.
cell phone towers.
Cell phone towers.
I see that on buildings, on top of buildings. They got a cluster of cell phones.
It looks like a
5G.
tree. It looks like a tree with 5G on it.
Put a clock on it, I guess you could.
It's all right if you put a clock on
But
it.
Or make it look
the
like a
bottom line
Christmas
is it has
tree.
to be approved and it has to look good and the board has to make sure it fits in, so.
Okay.
Covered.
I think I'll add that. We'll add that to the proposed bylaws. I think that's a good additions.
And then what's next is
The next one will be setbacks. And so right now, our current zoning bylaws at the top, if Joe, if you want to share your screen again, that would be a great help. The current setbacks in this area call for 0 to 15 feet. We are proposing setbacks in the range of 8 to 15 feet. Looking at 21 Main Street, the building setbacks range from 9.5 on I would say the left hand side of the building if you're looking directly at the building. I'm sorry, on the left hand side of the building to 12.5 on the right hand side of the building. When you take it back to 21 Main Street, on the plans that I was able to analyze and to approve, the setback would be 4.5 feet, and that's measured to the county easement line in 1985. And that was done, and so there you can kind of see the difference between the two buildings. So I think, you know, we've always talked about this 8 to 15, and I believe those are just two fairly good reference points to have.
And I'm sorry, and what does the 8 and 15 mean? Like, you understand what it means when you have
Minimum
20?
8 feet, maximum 15.
Minimum.
It's just a minimum and maximum?
That's what
Okay.
Yep. And that was to kind of add the ability to add seating like at 21 Main, and or just to kind of add some elements that would kind of create that streetscape that the board was looking for.
Do we see any situation where 15 feet would limit somebody doing something? They had, I don't know. I guess they're not going to put parking in the front.
They're not going to put parking in the front. I don't think so, Dale. I think you're probably going to I think more or less you'll be around, anywhere from 8 to 10, 8 to 12, 8 to 11, 12 maybe. I think 15 is obviously a lot to give back if you have, if you're on the front. But I think it also depends on the use, right? If you are, depending on the use that you're proposing within the redevelopment. And yet again, this is across, we wanted to make, put it across all the ADD zones. So I think having that 15 kind of gives some people the ability to set the building back a little bit to kind of add, maybe some screen, to add some more plantings, buffer area, just maybe for privacy and/or for exclusivity. But I think it makes sense.
Is over on Pleasant Street, is any of that ADD?
So Pleasant Street's ADDA, and it's also industrial.
So this wouldn't affect that?
Well, if you're using this bylaw, right, because it's an overlay district, when you get into those industrial areas, you can use this bylaw, right, to develop a mixed-use building per se, and/or you could use the zoning bylaw and then go by those regulations. The industrial regulations within that land use, I would say.
So you can use the industrial, but you can also use this. I'm saying that on Pleasant Street, there's not very many buildings that are 15 feet or less to the road. Commercial, the commercial buildings are all set way back.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't restrict them because they could still just use the industrial.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Even if they're building a mixed use building in there, they can still go back.
Well, they're using, if they're doing a mixed use building, yes, they're gonna have to be held to these regulations.
So if someone goes in the middle of Pleasant Street there and wants to build, I'm just thinking when I drive down there, most of those buildings are pretty far off the road on the train side. And if someone comes in and builds one of these, they have to build it 15 feet from the road there. Is that, it's gonna just stick out like, I'm just saying that, does anybody think that might be an issue or not if we restrict them to 15 feet for, and someone wants to come in and put a mixed use in there somewhere, and then it's 15 feet from the road and the rest of the buildings are all 40? If I'm throwing it out there, I don't have an opinion yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think it's all, you know, it's all looking at, is that area part of, it's not the downtown area that we're envisioning, you know, we're envisioning where we walked, you know, kind of that area downtown. We didn't walk down as far as Pleasant Street, you know, that far down.
Mhm.
So, you know, where are we envisioning? And then, you know, how do we see future development? Like, okay, if we erased everything on Pleasant Street and started again, then where would we place the buildings? You know, and so it's a much slower transition. I mean, you can even imagine in some cases a building close to the road and leaving the ones back behind the road, you know, and having these kind of double layer of buildings. But we also talked about that area as being like, wow, Ashland's probably quite, you know, a ways away from tearing down those buildings and creating something different. And we talked about one of the reasons Pleasant Street is great is that it's actually filled with light industrial, I guess it falls under, businesses where people work every day in Ashland. That's just one right after another of these businesses. So, and how do we maintain that as well? Because, you know, like I said, I don't think we're going to get a whole strip of yoga studios and coffee houses to support, you know, that Ashland's going to support. So
It's a great question because, as Trish said, right, the change along Pleasant Street, you know, is if it happens, right, it's obviously going to be a slow process, right, because those buildings are existing and they do kind of have some, they're full of great uses and they have historical uses, you know, as industrial places. However, that right now you're still within that same overlay district, right, and which is this ADDA, and so you're almost starting to. We're looking at it from two different views. One from Main Street, right? ADDA from Main Street, then ADDA from Pleasant Street, right? You know, I think, you know, we can increase that 15, Dale, to 25 to 2025. We can also talk about maybe adding a special permit to allow somebody to increase that front setback. If the applicant shows, you know, that the parcel and or the land area in the abutting buildings, a building setback further would be in, I would say, not conformance, but in similar setbacks to existing buildings per se.
Yeah, and I'm not saying either way would be right, because Trish had a point. Sometimes when you offset them, it gets a little bit of depth, and you know, there's different things you can do that it might be good to have some buildings up closer to the street and some back, and especially if someone comes in and builds a really nice looking new building in front of an old one that's kind of a metal building that blocks off the view of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought it is something I thought about, because going down Pleasant Street, I know most of the buildings over there are set back pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing to think of is all those buildings along Pleasant Street, the parking's in the front, right?
Yeah.
And then the one thing that we're moving away from in this ADDA is to put the parking in the back, to move those buildings closer to the street, to create that element of building relationship with the street, right? With the built environment, with, you know, having the street react with the proposed buildings and or within the built environment. And that's one of the main concepts of, I would say, form-based code in this type of zoning, is to kind of put the parking in the rear, have that bring those buildings forward to create those interactive elements with the street.
And once one person does it, you know, one group comes in and builds a nice building like that, some of the older buildings, they might start thinking about doing the same thing and start a little chain reaction or something.
Yeah, and you have to always zoning is this zoning is very proactive, right? You're thinking for the future. You're not thinking for, you know, you're not thinking for the 1 to 2 years. You're thinking for the 20 to 30 years, right down the line. How do you envision Pleasant Street?
And like you said, you can always put a provision in there to come to get approval for over 15 feet. That way they're not completely shut out. And if they can show that something works, then they can get it.
Or I'm even thinking like building reuse. Like, what if you're getting a building permit for, like, you buy 60 Pleasant Street where I am, and you're going to turn it into mixed use, but you don't want to just tear down the building that's there, or doesn't that fall under this? You know, you would be way back. Maybe that doesn't fall under this if you're going to reuse what's there.
We can make a note of all the reuse of buildings, you know.
I'm just curious. I mean, it's right next to the train station. You know, if it was a nice stream back there, you know, you'd think about the property different. But it's feet from the train tracks and back. I'm just trying to think through, you know, Dale's question.
And also the point that it's close to a train station, you have to provide for people who walk to the train station, who want to walk, right? So, and our zoning bylaws stress on pedestrian traffic, right? So. I know that scape might change and it might all become residential, so people might, maybe this topic might change, but currently, like you said, there is some light industrial buildings there.
Did we say the setbacks cover the overhangs as well?
Oh, when you're talking about the nearest point of the building. That's a good.
If I have floor 2 or floor 3 kind of out 2 feet and I can manage to get that 8 feet minimum, then it kind of changes the whole scale of the building. And then if I'm going higher with a special permit, should we start to kind of put those lines of, or define what that setback is, the minimum at least?
So you're saying
does the 8 foot include a canopy over the door or canopy over, you know, originally I think there were supposed to be canopies over 21 Main, but I think they're not on there anymore, or they weren't built. So, but would they have counted? I guess not. They wouldn't have counted in the setback. Maybe it's at grade. Maybe it's, you know, the actual face of the building.
We could say that it's the face of the facade of the first floor to the property line. So therefore, a canopy would not count, or any, you know, overhang.
So yeah, I mean, usually they have, even in setback lines, like for normal residential setback lines, they have, hey, the eave line doesn't count, steps out of a door don't count, a bulkhead to the basement doesn't count, you know, things like that.
I guess my question arose because, like, if I'm saying that downtown should be pedestrian friendly, and we have this roof at 20 feet, which accumulates snow in severe winter, and the whole chunk of snow falls. It happens in Boston all the time. And then we have the sidewalks kind of closed out because you have chunks of snow falling off from the roof. And these are kind of more residential areas where we want to encourage people walking around and not be worried to step on the road. So, I mean, should we start to define where that eave line is so that it doesn't kind of go way towards the kind of the sidewalk.
Well, if they're set back 8 feet, I don't think that the eaves would be that big.
Yeah.
It would be more like a covered porch in the front, if it was anything, but
Well, if level 2 kind of comes out 2 feet, then already I'm kind of 8 minus 2, and then obviously my eve again is almost at 4 or 6 feet, right?
Can you repeat that deeper? I'm sorry.
So if you're defining that the overhead, if the floor above on level 2 kind of can come out of that front face of the level 1 or overhang by 2 feet so that I get extra square footage on level 2 of the building on the interiors. Now my building roof will be 8 minus 2, 6, and then if obviously it's never like flush to the face of the building, it's obviously a foot or so. So now I'm starting to eat up on that 8 feet because my eave line now on the topmost floor is almost at 6 feet maybe.
Yeah, I don't think that's what, Peter, I don't think that's what you were saying, right? You're not saying that they can overhang
no.
that 8 foot minimum setback.
The closest point wall of the front of the building would be 8 feet.
Yeah, if you're back 15 feet.
If they wanted to have a 2 foot overhang, they would have to put the building at 10 feet and then second floor would be at 8 feet.
We can define that further to make sure it's clear.
I just make sure that any part of the building, usable front of the building, any part of the actual structure is not within 8 feet.
Yeah, and that's standard language for setbacks, because all those houses, right, that hang over 1 or 2 feet, the second, you're always going by the second floor. It's the floor that's furthest out that counts. So it's standard language that we should be able to just grab from.
Okay, I took a note on it, so I can work on that one.
Someone just put up that overlay district? There it is. Just take a look at it again real quick. So everything. Trying to get the legend, see what the dots and the crystals mean.
So, yeah, 1 second. I'll make it bigger. So, Peter, and to the board, we said that the stuff we're contemplating is for all of the ADD zones, right?
Correct.
So, go ahead, Tricia.
I'm just looking at the map of, that shows the buildings on it right now. And there's actually very few spots on the street. I mean, the buildings are there, but that have a really significant setback. It's my building, 60 Pleasant Street. Then there's a bunch of houses and small buildings. It's Worcester Air, Solar Flare, down to like Connect Church sits far back. But it's not actually that many buildings that really sit far back on the site. It seems like it because they're big buildings, but there's not that many of them. So.
But do you guys believe that these setbacks and the height requirements that we're discussing here, like for this strip, which is zoned in, which has an underlying zoning of industrial, right? So I'm gonna annotate here 1 second. Like for this strip, Sorry, wrong color. Sorry. Like for this, sorry.
That would be the southern edge of Pleasant Street, Joe.
Yeah, which has an underlying zoning of industrial, right?
Correct.
So like for this piece, this is what you've been kind of getting at is like, do we really want to put? Or we're saying that in the next 20, 30 years, that the nature of this piece, this EDDA overlay, is going to change, and that the zoning that we're proposing for this, the setbacks and the height, which is what we've discussed so far, are going to be what goes there. And to me, I mean, there's a reason that this strip is industrial and full of those businesses that you just laid out, Tricia. It's because where 60 Pleasant Street is now, there was a shoe factory in the 1800s, and next to it there was a mill, which is the mill where so like this section of Ashland, this part of Pleasant Street, has been industrial or light industrial or business oriented for a long period of time, right? So I don't know. I'm not I'm not sure if what I'm saying is useful, but I guess I'm fine with the discussion about the height. I'm fine with the discussion about the setbacks, but I'm concerned that the broad brush, I know that we want to get this I know we want to get this done. I'm just saying, like, I'm not sure that we can just say that everything we're talking about pertains to all the ADD zones. That's my one opinion, but.
Okay. Well, no, I just want to comment on that, George. There's no pressure on us. If the board's not confident to bring this to town meeting, then I don't think we should bring it to town meeting.
I'm not in any way indicating that like we can't or that there's not something that we can get done at this board whatsoever. I'm just saying that I'm just concerned about taking a broad brush on these choices. Like I think the conversation about height and setbacks has been great. I just
and remember, Joe, it's still industrial, so someone can come in and put industrial in there. This is just if someone comes in and puts a mixed use building, it should comply match with what we got going on.
Fair enough. So then what are so Peter, educate me here. So if they come in and they say, well, that's great about ADDA, good for you, but I want to use it for industrial. What are the setbacks for industrial? Are they different?
Yes, 40 feet. So industrial setback. So the industrial
for all the hot air. Yep.
So the industrial dimensional requirements for a lot of industrial is 40 feet from the front, and then 30 from the sides and the rear, and then a minimum lot is 30,000 square feet and 150 feet of frontage.
Can I share my screen for a minute here?
Sure.
Let me I'm just showing what I was talking about with so can everyone see the map of Ashland here?
It's coming on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so we all have this in our heads, when we're talking about the setback, we notice this is the 60 Pleasant Street building. This is where I am. So it has this setback, but all along, otherwise both sides of the street, there really isn't that setback until you get to down here. And those are probably closer to that 40 feet there, about 40 feet. They're probably not exact. I think these are empty lots, Connect Church. But on this side of the street, so even when,
is that residential?
when Dale was saying, boy, it would be really weird for something to be up close, it might not really, because there's big stretches of this street, including the whole other side of the street, where the buildings are right there.
Yeah.
Are
those residential?
This is all residential. These are residential. So, of course they might change.
It doesn't look like the lot size is big enough for industrial on some of those.
Yeah, you'd have to buy the whole block probably.
Yeah, all those lots on Forest Ave, well, I'm gonna say on the right hand, on the residential lots on Forest and Metcalf I would probably say those are going to fall under the category of pre-existing non-conforming.
Right, right.
But if you
Like
go
down
to
here.
build something new on there, it's not industrial on one of those residential lots, you can't.
Yeah, that's a tough.
Yeah,
Plus
well,
the-
so what I was just saying is that
Exactly.
if the overlay stuff is in place, so it's a 15-foot setback, it's not really going to be out of place here.
No,
You know, I mean, the building type will be because it's not that scale, but the setback, there's a lot of that setback there.
someone wanted to put a project in one of those empty lots or something.
Yeah, if someone built something here.
And across the street, all the houses aren't set back that far, and then down the
No.
street they aren't either, so it wouldn't really. Good point. It's good to see this.
Yeah, so I think these buildings are, if I look at the scale, you know, they're probably about 40 feet back from, I assume this is like the line. You know, it's probably about 40 feet. So even if they were out 15 feet, it wouldn't be significantly different than these buildings. So anyway, that's all I can stop sharing.
Well, that helps a lot. Helps me.
I can measure them real quick.
You do have a tendency to notice those parking lots. You know, your eye kind of is directed toward the bigger buildings and these big parking lots.
So 200 Homer, which I believe is industrial building, is set back 75 feet from the street. Trish, the building you're in, which I believe is 146 to 148.
No, Pleasant
No.
Street?
I'm
60.
sorry, you're at 60. Yep. I'm at the wrong end of it. I'm sorry. All right. I think we talked about, I think we have all the answers.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Is everybody all set? Do you mind if I move on?
Yeah.
At the last meeting, I know we brought up just the conversation about FAR, floor area ratio, and how that's measured. We're not proposing any changes to this, but just to kind of fill in the gaps or just to answer any questions that we may have, I just kind of want to point to the fact that the floor area ratio for 21 Main Street was 0.87, and then then the floor area ratio for 128 Main Street was 0.15. What is? I'm sorry, 1.5. Yes. So the current zoning calls for 2, and the proposed we're going to leave it at 2. I would say. Does anybody have anything to add or?
Well, the 128 Main to me sounds like feels like it was really jammed on that property, like every square foot was eked out of that building.
Which is why 2 worries me, right? Because is that not the right? The point is at FAR of 2, it means a larger massing on a piece of property would be allowed even than 128, right?
So yeah, another 0.5% would be a lot more building on 128.
The thing is that with the setbacks, and height restrictions, they kind of govern what you can do too. You still can't go over the setbacks and height restrictions or the number of stories. So no matter what you're allowed FAR, unless you're going 3 stories underground, you can't get there. So FAR is always just a little complicated and tricky. You know, it's not calculated so simply. So this is good. This is good and good illustration. And the 2 seems kind of random to me as well. But I'm not sure that's really how we need. I'm not sure that's our easiest way to control what we want, you know.
Because like you said, the setbacks are going to limit to what you can do anyway.
Yeah.
height.
And typically, the main drivers in how you control how one controls building sizing and massing, right, is through setbacks. Some do FAR, right? You know, and also parking requirements here. And so those are 3 elements that you have to calculate to make sure that any proposed building has to fit within that box, right? And so if you could provide the parking calculations within, you know, a 38-foot building and have FAR of 0.7, 1.75, and it all works, then, you know, I would say that that's great, right? However, I think most buildings you may see are going to fall between 1 and 1.5 because of those other restrictions that are placed upon that lot and or development from our bylaws.
And if you look at 128 Main Street, that's 4.5 feet back. If that goes to 8, that number is going to drop on that one too.
Correct.
And still be able to drive in the side and do what they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it certainly might be worth taking a look at some point, instead of having it be 2, have it be down at 1.5. You know, I'm just not sure what that number is. It's just, you know, it's tricky to, you know, when you're figuring out FAR, you're counting a different percentage for mezzanines, and you're counting different percentages for how much basement is exposed, and it's just it's a complicated number. So.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to really look into before to get your head around, I guess.
Maybe we just leave that as is for now.
Yeah.
Concentrate more on how it looks and fits into the property.
I think as long as we have the proper controls on the setbacks and height and stories, then it's really hard for them to squeeze more into a building. There's just no place to go. So, and that's why it is important to have the number of stories, so that you don't turn what should be a 3-story building into 4 stories with the absolute minimum ceiling height for all the stories, right? So we put 3 stories and you can't do that.
No, yeah, I agree.
And, you know, we should have something though, that a story starts within 12 inches of the ground or whatever it is. You know, I mean, for ADA, you really have to be able to wheel in off the street. So maybe it starts at sidewalk level.
So Tricia, given what you just said and how the other dimensional requirements help to pen this in, like I'm okay with 2 if you think basically what you said is you're never going to get there, but you'll get as close as you can with the other dimensional restrictions. So I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, like what I'm saying is, like, I mean, I have a lot of experience with it in a single family, 2-family residential way. So while if I think about 128 Main Street at 1.5, I'm like, I don't think we want to go any denser than that, you know.
I agree.
But I also know that those numbers, there's just a lot in them, you know, and I assume with commercial and non-residential properties, it's just as complicated, if not more so, than it is with residential. And so I in no way know if those are good numbers or bad numbers. You know, we would really have to look at it more carefully. What we do understand is setback and stories and height. And hey, your first floor can't be 5 feet off the ground, allowing you to now get a basement in there. Well, even if you did that, you wouldn't get your 3 stories in. You know, you wouldn't get under the 38 feet, which is why it's important to have both of those things.
So you're go ahead. Sorry,
Joe, go ahead.
No, I'm a big mouth. You please go ahead.
No, so on that column under proposed, so what is that 60 feet? Is that horizontal dimension that we're talking about?
That's the horizontal dimension, correct.
And the minimum vertical dimension 35. So this has nothing to do with the 38 that we are looking at.
No.
That is totally different. Mhm.
The face of the building needs to be,
That's the face of the building looking at the street.
Thank you.
So how did we get to, can we go on and talk about that now? Because we
Yeah.
haven't yet.
Yeah.
How did we get there? Like if we look at if we look at 21 Main, it's 70 feet wide. And it breaks at 40, its longest part is 44.
Mhm.
That doesn't seem too long. Then why is the articulation at 35? You know, just like, how did we get to those numbers? What are they based on?
That's exactly why I was wondering when I looked at the other two numbers. It's like, wait a minute, how did that happen? Thank you, Trisha.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I like that we're talking about those numbers. But 35 feet, when we look at 21 Main, I think everyone 21 Main works really well. Okay, that's 44 feet. Are we saying we don't like 21 Main at 44 feet? That's too wide? Because now it has to be 35? Like, you know, what are we saying?
I don't, you know what? I don't have a good answer for that. I think that was a number that I think has been in this, that was placed in by our consultant when we kind of went through this the first full times around. I don't recall why that 35, we landed on that 35 feet, but I think it's a great.
so
And I don't believe 44 is too, I think I'm sorry, my internet is unstable.
So that would mean that the 21 Main, if under the new one, would have had to been split right in the middle instead of offset like that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I have to think about that because of different designs. I mean, it might and if it's an 80-foot building, then you got 35 and 35 and 5 feet. So it's 40 feet on one section. How does that work? I mean,
Well, I think there's lots of ways.
35 feet.
I think there's always ways to divide it. And even if it's straight down the middle, you can do something creative that way.
Okay, open and 60 feet or greater must be an articulation in the front of the building, you know, something.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if that 35 feet shouldn't be based on our present experience in Ashland, if that 35 feet shouldn't be 45 feet. Because we look at Bagel Table and we say, hey, 44 feet feels fine, you know? So put it at 45 instead of 35, because at least we're basing off something we can actually see and look at and we know. They don't have to do it at 45.
That's a minimum, yeah, exactly. That's a minimum.
Yeah.
They could do it. I'm just, you know.
Yeah, they can go less,
35
they
on
can
a-
divide it how they want, but you can't have a strip of longer than 45 feet.
Okay.
And I think it's also important with that to say, how far does it have to go back to articulate? You know, is it just 6 inches? Or is it like Bagel Table 3 feet? Or is it 2 feet? You know, it doesn't have to be exactly like Bagel Table, but we have to give a break.
Shall be greater than a foot.
I might say 2.
2. Okay.
Because on a building that scale, a foot really doesn't do much. Even on a house, a foot doesn't do much.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, I agree. That number, I think measuring the Bagel Table is a ground truth, right? And that's what we're doing tonight. And for the other example, which would be with 128, that building from left to right is 64 feet wide.
So then under the new one, they would have to have at least one pushback.
Or shrink that building to 60 feet.
Yeah.
Or come in 4 feet to so they don't have to do an articulation.
Yeah, so we're saying a building could be 60 feet wide, no articulation.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I think that's, we have lots of buildings like that, you know.
Should then the wording change a little bit? Because I don't know if that really explains that way. But so definitely we should add the wide in so that that makes sense. But then if it's 64, we are saying we don't need that break. Should that wording kind of define it a little bit? Because it says 60 feet or greater. What is that greater number?
It means if the building's 68 feet, you have to articulate it at every 40 feet, 45 or whatever we put it at. So
Yeah.
if it's 60 feet or wider, you must make a setback at 45 feet maximum.
Mhm.
And you
If
could
I
do
could
it
just-
smaller, you could do a couple of setbacks at 20 feet or however you want to do like that, just to give it some depth. But you can't have a building 60 feet, over 60 feet without that.
The proposed zoning language does have more details about what qualifies for this requirement. We were just trying to fit it in a bite-size version.
Yeah, this chart actually is really helpful. It's very straightforward. So,
Would you like me to read verbatim what the proposal, that section would be?
Real quick, how long will that take?
My, I'm not going to answer that one.
It might be helpful.
Okay, the first sentence says, where buildings are greater than 60 feet in length along the public right of way, buildings shall have a vertical modular element at a minimum of every 45 feet.
Of an articulation of
I'm going to add that
feet.
with an articulation of 2 or more feet. We'll add that sentence in, and these required vertical articulation elements include a combination of changes in a vertical plane of the building, minimum of 1 foot, in a maximum of 4 feet. Vertical architectural details such as a column, plaster on the lake varied. Change of materials and other elements which, in the opinion of the planning board, achieve the desired effect.
And just a really like a little minor technical question. Okay, you said length. Is there a wording difference between width and length when you're looking at a building? So if you're looking at it from the front, would it be width or would that be length, or it doesn't matter?
that's a good question. Usually from the
Front.
from the front to the back, we say depth, the
Okay.
depth of the building. But across the front,
I mean, either one is
I think I typically say wide and deep
width
versus
yeah.
long versus
So
length.
it'll be width.
Yeah.
I think so.
I
I'm trying to think what I do in everyday practice, you
When he
know.
read that, it sounded like when he said length, it sounded like going back or going, it's long. I just didn't know.
Yeah, no, I think
Technically, you can probably look that up somehow.
Okay. It says, so it'd be where buildings are greater than 60 feet in width along the public right of way,
Yes,
buildings shall have.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds more correct to me, but I don't.
I think that's right. I think that's more common.
Okay. All right.
Is everybody any more on that? Matt?
I think I'm good.
So we're going to put these together, Pete, and get the final wording. And
Yeah, I'm gonna put these together, and I'm gonna, I think it's good that we're working through this, and then we'll get the, I'll work with the consultant to get the final wording and packaging together, for the board to review at our next meeting, and then we can kind of keep the ball rolling forward. There was a couple other things I know we needed just to kind of, I just wanted to highlight. At the last meeting, I know we talked about flat roofs versus all the other different types of roofs. And I'm sorry, my notes are, I'm a little unorganized.
And ever since then, I've been looking at every flat roof to see what it looks like.
What
And
do you-
there's some really nice ones and there's some really ugly ones.
Same thing with every other roof type. Some really ugly mansards and some really beautiful ones, you know.
Funny how that happens, you know, when you're talking about something, you start noticing. When we did the power poles over at the landfill, all of a sudden I realized how much wire and poles there are in town, dangling over everything and in and out. It's just amazing.
Welcome to my world. As soon as I'm focused on something in my work, it's all I see as I drive down the street. So
And so overall, going back to building height, we are going to take the special permit. We're going to take the special permit out, which will grant somebody the ability to go to 4 stories or 45 feet. Is that where we've landed? Yeah. Okay.
And then special permit would be to build a feature above 30 feet.
Okay. I know we talked about minimum versus maximum lot sizes, and our consultant Chris did an inventory of building lots sizes within the downtown district. A lot of these lots are smaller, and we have a minimum lot size in the ADD districts as of 30,000 square feet, I believe. I'm sorry, no. As lot sizes would be in the A district, 35,000 square feet. In the B district for a mixed use building, it would be 20,000 square feet. And in the C district, it would be 8,000 square feet. In item 5.5.7, section 8, we built in a special permit, and that would give the planning board to be able to grant a special permit to allow a lot that did not meet that required minimum lot square footage to continue on the permitting project or permitting path using the ADD district. Does that make sense? So we built in some flexibility to allow a lot that may be 15,000 square feet in the ADDA, which do exist, to continue on for a redevelopment project, per se. Does anybody have any issues with that? I think that was a good way to kind of add some flexibility into the bylaw.
it just means, I don't know, what does it mean? So you have a non-conforming lot because it's small.
Correct.
As long as you're following all the guidelines, you can continue. And if you can't fit your building, the setbacks don't work for you because you have such a small lot, you go for a special permit like anybody would do. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
But you could have something like a coffee shop that really just needs a very small footprint, and you might be fine with that.
Yeah, and the special permit would be granted by the planning board in this instance, and it would be part of the overall package within the application, I would say. And then we talked about that. We talked about the width of the buildings. And then the other element, I know we got into roof types, special permit, I'm sorry, for flat roofs. So in the section, which is, which is section 8.5.12 building design standards. Section 4, we added the planning board may grant. So we got into that conversation about flat roofs, right? And how we needed that element of a excuse my language, of molding up at the top, right, to create that detail into those cornices, right? And so, in speaking with Chris, our consultant, he watched the video and he saw the concerns is that we are allowing this. So if a builder wants to come in and have a flat roof, that's going to require a special permit from the planning board, right? And so how it would read is, building shall have one of the following roof types: a flat gable, a front gable, a side gable, a mansard, or a hip roof. The planning board may grant a special permit for flat roofs or other roof styles if the applicant can demonstrate that a proposed design will enhance the character of the neighborhood through inclusions of historical and appropriate architectural details, such as cornices, moldings, and other of the like. My question would be, A, does that fit the needs of the board, as we spoke about last meeting? And B, would the planning board want to add mansard roofs for a special permit? And I know that could be, because we got into the whole mansard roofs, what do we like versus the straight versus the witch's cap? I know we always talked about.
And there's a lot of examples, especially houses around town hall. They're just straight mansard roofs. So it's kind of hard to tell them they have to do a certain way when there's a whole bunch of buildings that have, older buildings.
Yeah.
And the flat roof thing, and everybody knows this, if you go around Framingham and Boston, you don't want those new modern flat roof looking things.
I think though it might be a reason to put mansard roof in there, in with the special permit, because you can say, oh, there's a lot of, I did what I saw in town when half of them in town are really bad.
Yeah.
Right. So it allows it to be there, but for us to control, control it.
To control it, and I know I was Googling details of mansard roofs, and I went down a rabbit hole. And you're trying to pick out one that may fit 6 different types of buildings, right? And I think it's just you get to a point where it's how far do you go in the design of a building, right? And that's what architecture is for. Architect on the project is therefore it's to design a building that looks good, which would include the type of and use whatever type of mansard which will be appropriate for that building in that location, I would say.
And in those where we're changing the showing the little diagrams of what we like, might want to put something in there too, mansard, and describe it in there somehow, to where it's, our idea of a mansard roof is curved lines or something, and that other part we're working on with the diagrams and the roof diagrams and the dormers and all that stuff. Put an example in there just to steer them that way also.
Okay.
Or not.
So Peter, is your concern that with adding that flat roof and somebody just slaps in a cornice detail there, we will start to lose the mansard roof from the kind of the fabric? Is that what the concern is?
I don't think that's the concern, Deeper. I think the concern is that we always talked about mansard roofs. They look good. Obviously, what fits, right? And there's a mansard roof at 128 Main Street, right? But if you drive around the downtown, there's many examples. There's mansard roofs at 10 to 50 Main Street, right? And obviously they're historically used. There's different roof types in the town. And I think, the board always talked about the angles and the rake of each roof to make sure that the appropriate angle and the rake, is that the right, I don't know if rake is the right word, but the appropriate angle of a mansard roof that, you know, would fit the building that was proposed, right? And I think it would just go another step to give the planning board the ability to weigh in on the look from the architectural standpoint of which roof type or which mansard roof type would look better, right? A straight or steep angle, or that witch's cap with that bell curve, and to give the planning board that flexibility, you know. And I don't think anyone's against mansard roofs. And I don't think anyone's against flat roofs. I think the board is trying to say is we want them done right, and the board will make the judgment as they kind of come one at a time.
Yeah.
You know, because roofs have been a big part of the, no, I don't want to say criticism, but a big part of how people talk about massing and, you know, how does that building interact with the street, I would say.
You know, another thing I don't know, you know, that if you're talking just about your gabled and hip roofs, you know, is there a slope associated with those? Like, can they do a 212 slope, which is basically flat, and then that's okay? You know, I'm just curious as to, do we, if you can't tell it's a gable or a hip because it's so flat, does it, you know, is that defeating our purpose as well? Are we defining gable roofs or as a 612 or higher pitch, you know, or whatever? Just
No, at this point we're not. However, I'm happy to add those definitions, right?
I'm just curious because, you know, when you talk about any of these roofs, you can do any of these roofs poorly, and you can do any of them well, you know.
And part of it too is just the general construction, because if it's too low to put shingles on it, it's kind of considered a flat roof. If you can't put shingles, which is like a 3 and 12 pitch minimum in construction, when you're building something, you can't put shingles below a certain, then you have to do a different type of roof, which has always been considered in my world to be a flat roof if it's not pitched enough to put shingles on. So I don't know if there's any standard definition for that or not, but something to think about.
Would adding Victorian or colonial to mansard kind of start to define it one step better? Because there are two styles even within that big broad style, correct? Because the roof type, I was under the impression whether it's colonial or Victorian, there's a style difference. But I'm not sure if it changes the kind of the angles and things like that of the dormers, though.
I think there's definitely different style differences. I mean, like there's a French country mansard roof, you know, there's a, but I don't think any of the styles are defined so precisely that you could write out a grocery list about it. And I think, I think any of those types may be fine as long as it's done well, you know, or a variation of those types could be fine, as long as it's done well. And I think that's where I guess it's just with the committee's eyes looking at it, like, no, it just doesn't look good, or yes, it does, you know, kind of thing. We've certainly seen some projects that just 81 West Union just don't look good time and time again, right? So.
Okay. So at the end of do you think from a consensus of the board, does it make sense to move mansard into a special permit?
I think for now I would do it.
Being able to make sure it looks good, I think it does. like you said, there's a wide variety of mansard roof, and if they're allowed to just do whatever they kindly want, if they want it straight, it's easy. And you're gonna get a lot of that probably. I think most of the ones that we've worked on, the only reason they do that little witch's cap is because we told them that's what we want. The last couple, I mean, so I don't think.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think I'm gonna move.
Okay.
I'll move that into special permit. Okay.
I mean, I think if we don't, we'd have to define it more, like what they can do, you know, you'd have to define it more than just say mansard. If we don't need to, if it's by right.
If it's by right, I agree with you, Trish. We have to define it because
To define it more.
we need to define it more because we need to say this is the detail we want, right?
Yeah.
And we got in, you know, thank you, Deepa, for adding Victorian and colonial and French country. I know, Trish, you know, these are all things that come into play, right? Each building is going to look maybe a little bit different depending on the style of the roof. And so at that point, you leave it up to the architect to move it forward, you know?
So then maybe just make the flat or mansard roofs are allowed with the approval of the planning board. And then that way they know that to ask, what do you want? And we can put examples in their drawings. And then, and if they bring it in and it just doesn't look right, then they have to change it up.
Yeah, I mean, the special permit for a mansard might scare some people away from mansard, but then it's probably better that they get scared away.
Yeah.
The special permit for a flat roof won't scare them because they get a lot by going with a flat roof. They're going to get higher ceilings, they're going to get easier construction, which is great, but they just have to do it right. So it's not going to scare off people wanting to do a flat roof that they go through special permit.
And we kind of do have a lot of mansards already in town, and we've kind of done a lot of new mansards recently. So
True.
at some level, diversity, right? It may not be.
Okay. Okay. And on that note, that kind of wraps up the details that I had brought forth tonight on zoning, I would say.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything that they want to add?
We're going to get it all written up and checked and approved and verified and what language. And then we'll be able to look at that maybe at the next meeting. And
yep, I'm gonna write it. I'll work to write. I'll talk to our consultant, and maybe at the next meeting, I will see if he can join us to see if we could kind of talk through it one more time before we host our public hearing, getting it ready for town meeting if the board feels comfortable with it at that point, I would say.
all right.
All right.
And now we're going to discuss possible zoning bylaw amendments. Cover porch bylaw, design review, trigger correction. I think we got there on the covered porch thing. We were just waiting to get it, see the language.
Yep.
The covered porch bylaw is currently under review from town council. And so we don't have that final language yet. But once we do, we'll distribute that. And we're hoping to schedule the public hearing, I think, for the second meeting in April.
So maybe the next meeting we can have it and finish that up. Okay. And then the triggering the design review trigger correction, that was simple, right?
Yep, that's ready to go. We're gonna keep it kind of paired with the porch bylaw so we can have both those public hearings on the same day.
Okay. All right, that was easy. Review and approval of minutes from January 28th. And everybody seems to have done that. I had one, I think it was on the 28th. The thing I saw was where it said Trish. Trisha said she was interested in being on the Main Street committee. Isn't that a 10 to 40 Main Street committee or something?
10 to 50 Main Street.
1050. It just said Main Street committee. So maybe a little more description of what that is.
So we're on the January 28th, right?
Yeah, this is the,
Yep.
we already reviewed this, yeah, we already reviewed this, right? There was this-
I just had one correction, and maybe I was just tired not reading it right, but it's a sentence starting, actually, I'm not sure its original form because I was playing around with it. On line 9, so under downtown zoning presentation follow-up, I think the first sentence reads fine in that paragraph. And then I thought it was a little confusing about what it was saying. So I don't have the original in front of me, but this is what I put instead. I said, he explained that because the overlay district overlaps both industrial and downtown commerce zoning, the MAPC consultant suggested that the overlay Ashland Downtown District, ADD, become the base zoning, which would add clarity for future development. That's how I changed it, because I felt, I don't know, I just felt it wasn't reading quite right. I wonder if I can send that in like a comment. Can I copy?
in your chat, you can
In a
keep
chat, yeah, chat.
There's no chat.
There's no chat.
Oh,
I can share my screen.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think I was taking notes, so I think I got your sentence.
Okay, yeah, I can send it to you too, but there was just something, it took me a while to reshuffle it a little bit just to, because I knew what it was supposed to be saying, and it just wasn't quite there for me. So.
anything else from anybody? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 28th, 2021,
As amended,
as amended.
so moved.
second that.
All in favor?
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, I.
Deepa Venkatai.
Joe Roberts, aye.
Dale Buchanan, aye. It passes 5-0. And now we'll do the February 25th meeting minutes. Does anybody have any?
I have just a couple little things. On line 15, again, I don't know how I changed it. Planning board to vote on and adopt. I think it was just missing that word. On line 37, 38, wasn't Ujwala Punaker there as well from the design review committee? Or am I?
There are 3.
Yep. So she was, but she actually left right before they voted to it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's what I wanted to check on because I thought she was there.
Yeah, in their minutes, it will reflect that she was there.
Okay.
But not for the adjournment vote.
Got it. And then on line 72, I can't remember what the original was, but I put the members agreed to review, and I highlighted a draft variance with restrictions. Maybe I didn't understand what that was, a draft variance.
Yeah, man.
What's the variance? I guess I'm not sure. I don't remember what that was. We're talking about the covered porch bylaw.
That you're gonna make a draft of it and
I think we were just talking about the process of what someone would have to go through right now if they want to step foot into their setback regarding the development of a porch. And so I think we stated that if someone's going to propose a covered porch or a porch, they would have to go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance. I think that's the conversation we were having.
Yeah, I don't know from this language, is that something we're proposing or is that something that exists?
I think
That we're just reading it over?
I think it was in theory. I think the conversation was in theory.
Was what, in theory?
It was just a conversational piece. It was kind of one of those flowing conversations regarding what would have to happen today versus what would happen with the adoption of a covered porch bylaw.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just think it has to be checked because I still don't know what that means, what I agreed to. The members agreed. I'm like, what did I agree to? I don't know.
They agreed to, we were going to write it up and we were going to review it.
Yeah.
Maybe
is it
that
the
should just read language.
Is it the word variance?
Yeah, I
Because
think
this
it's-
bylaw is it's not a variance, right?
No,
The
I think that
version,
should be
draft
just
version
language.
with restrictions.
Yeah,
Draft,
version.
A draft bylaw or
draft version of the bylaw with restrictions.
yeah, I guess because variance is something different, you know. So I'm like, where is there a variance in this? Okay, that's where I got hung up, I guess. And that's all I had.
All right, wait till Joe gets back, I guess, to vote, huh?
You went to San Fran,
Don't
though.
really need him, right? He fell off the cliff.
He's been very quiet.
Joe, where'd you go? I guess we can vote on it anyway, right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
For
we got enough. So I'll entertain a motion to approve February 25th minutes with the amendments.
So moved.
second,
All in favor?
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, I.
Deepa Venkata.
Dale Buchanan, aye. That passes 4-0-1, like, technically, right? Okay.
Should we? Oh, there.
Oh,
I thought maybe he'd
Sorry,
be-
the dog had to go out. I was trying to like, okay, can I do this? I apologize.
sorry. We just voted you onto a couple more committees.
Yeah. Perfect. So, do you guys approve the minutes as amended?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. Joe Rubertone, aye.
okay. It's 5-0-0.
Whatever that's worth.
Any administrative matters, future meetings, public hearings?
Just a real quick, the next meeting will be on the 8th. Hopefully we'll have something for Zara Magonko. Obviously the bylaws, everyone is up to speed. The property at 501 Pond Street, the developer, I think I've mentioned it at the last couple of meetings. The developer, his name is Lars. He is proposing to develop that site with a number of residential units in the range of about 125 to 145-ish. And we won't know until he kind of files the application. Emma earlier this week sent you out a notice that Lars and Attorney Jeffrey Efrin set up a private meeting with the abutters and with that neighborhood. That meeting took place, I believe, Wednesday night. I'm going to be sending out the PowerPoint that they use to all the board members for your review, just to kind of give you everyone a heads up on what that was. I did not attend the meeting.
What was the address again, Peter?
501. It's the property on the town line with Holliston, where the putt is.
Got it.
Hudson, I call it.
Hudson. Yep.
So I'll be sending out that PowerPoint to everybody tomorrow. People are, developers are still interested in Phase 7 of Village of the Americas. I'm still having meetings with people on those projects. And in 501 Main, in 10 to 50 Main Street is still underway. And I hope everyone had the chance to talk to April Anderson, our consultant. I reached out to Rich Gordon, the developer, looking for an update. I haven't heard back. And I also reached out to Charlie Zamudo for an update, and I did not hear back leading up to this meeting. So with that said, I have nothing more to add for tonight's meeting.
Okay, any report from any board members? No?
No.
Well, then 9:01, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Trisha Kendall, I.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Deepa Venkatai.
Over Tony.
Jim Buchanan, I pass it 5-0-0. Thank you and good night.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Good
great
night,
night.
everyone.
Night.
Good
Bye.
night.
Bye-bye.